amazing because, you know, you sort of wonder, are you going mad? And there really isn't any guidance for this. And, you know, it was suggested I see counsellors and psychologists, and I found that, you know, just completely unhelpful. I was usually passing the box of tissues to them as I was describing the story. And again, because I could hold this greater awareness and understanding, there was such relief. And even, you know, to the point that I would drive down to the site where he was killed, and a ball of light would come out of the site where he was killed and actually hit me and soothe me. And I would go, oh, that's right, it's all okay.
Yeah.
It's all going to be okay. And then I'd get in my car and I'd think, oh, wow, something amazing is going on here. I feel okay, everything's okay. And I'd get home and half an hour later I'd go, what's going on? Am I insane? How could this possibly be okay? So trying to...
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow! I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of Deliberate Creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello, welcome to ATP Media. You're with Karen Swain, teacher of Deliberate Creation. I'm here today with a fascinating guest who I met up at the Close Encounters conference in Byron Bay recently. My little friends come to say hello. Dr. Maree Batchelor, who's a multi-dimensional physician, and she has an extraordinary story to share with us about her awakening journey. And then we're going to get into some conversation about what all this means, and we're going to talk about some healing, one of my favourite subjects. Hello, Maree. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Karen, and thank you very much for having me on the show. It's beautiful to be here and always a pleasure to share my story, and you know, if I can help other people with their awakening journeys, that's what it's all about. So
yeah,
thank you for having me.
Maree has an extraordinary journey, not one we all want to go through, but look, one that we've all been through. I really believe that, you know, death is one of the most powerful wake-up calls. It's like a wake-up call. Hello, there's more to us than meets the eye. There's more to the physical body than there's more to us than the physical body. So, do you want to tell us, you know, what happened? And we'll start at the beginning.
Sure. And look, just commenting on death as a wake-up call, I think one of the things that was fortunate for me was that it was a wake-up call, and I can't imagine how people face the loss and death like I had without this support from the multidimensional realms, and then an understanding coming in of what really was going on. And that was what saved me through that terrible grief. Yeah. So my story begins in 2008. So I was married, I was working as a GP medical doctor, married to a surgeon, living in a life of luxury, mansion with swimming pool, tennis court, 4 beautiful children, 2, 4, 6 and 8. And I went for a family walk with my extended family, my brothers and sister and father and uncles and, you know, cousins. And we were on a very quiet beach in Mount Eliza, here where I live. And we walked up the stairs and there were no, you know, the car park was empty, and then all of a sudden a car appeared driven by an underage driver who couldn't control the vehicle, and he went straight up onto the path and squashed my son onto the fence in front of us all. The driver was so incapable of driving the car, he didn't even know how to reverse, and he just jumped out and ran off. And my brother then got in the car and backed it off. Now, when I saw the whole scenario, I just thought, this doesn't, you know, there's unlikely to be survival. So it was instant that I knew that this was you know, a tragic accident. Interesting though, at that time, I had some sort of downloads that there was something bigger going on, even in that moment instantly. And, you know, Karen, I didn't have any religious or spiritual background. I was as 3D as they come.
A scientist.
There was no understanding of anything beyond just the material existence of who we are. And but at that time, something came in immediately. So that was sort of unusual. Obviously completely distraught, devastated, and William was airlifted to the Royal Children's Hospital, and he arrived at the hospital, and with my husband had flown with him, and I got a call from my husband to say that he'd arrived and they'd taken him to theatre. He was alive at that point, and it was sort of like, okay, so this is really good news. You've made it into the hospital and into theatre alive. That's a really positive sign. But as he was speaking to me and I was packing my bag to drive up with my sister to the hospital, a bright light appeared in my face, just staring at me. And I was so confused at that point, thinking, what is this? Am I getting a migraine? And I really didn't understand. And I just had the call from my husband. He's at the hospital. So we just got up there. But interestingly, I found out later that he had died on the table at that time, and they had done open chest cardiac massage to revive him. He had had such extensive blood loss. So that light was clearly him coming to me at that time of death. He struggled throughout 11 days in the hospital, having multiple surgeries, and the whole thing was just a terrible ordeal and just, you know, overwhelming at every level. And it was after he had died that I was calling out to God again, not religious, not spiritual. And I was saying, you have to help me. I can't bear this. And I got clear messages. I got, you must be still. You must be quiet. And I just thought, oh, okay, all right. I need to meditate. I really need to, you know, just sit with this and really work through this grief, really within me. And so I did as God had told me, and I shut our gates, and I spent many months studying spiritual texts, and I particularly used Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and I found that just soothed me. And, you know, I continued to get knowings dropping in of higher dimensional understandings that we weren't just this body, there was something else going on. I'd feel a presence of William around me. I just knew there was something else. So as I was dealing with the devastating grief, there was also this greater awareness and greater understanding coming in. And that in itself was very confusing because, you know, you sort of wonder, are you going mad? And there really isn't any guidance for this. And, you know, it was suggested I see counsellors and psychologists, and I found that, you know, just completely unhelpful. I was usually passing the box of tissues to them as I was describing the story. And again, because I could hold this greater awareness and understanding, there was such relief. And even, you know, to the point that I would drive down to the site where he was killed, and a ball of light would come out of the site where he was killed and actually hit me and soothe me. And I would go, oh, that's right, it's all okay.
Yeah.
It's all going to be okay. And then I'd get in my car and I'd think, oh, wow, something amazing is going on here. I feel okay, everything's okay. And I'd get home and half an hour later I'd go, what's going on? Am I insane? How could this possibly be okay? So trying to even integrate at that very early stage, that level of awakening with tragedy was very confusing. And the local people kept saying, when is she going to get over it? But little did they realise that my withdrawal from the community was not just about grief. It was actually about the spiritual process, which a lot of people would be going through, where they do need to withdraw and be quiet to find out who they are without the noise of everybody else and the distraction. It just so happened that it was happening to me in the context of grief. I then knew that I needed to meditate and really continue to look at, you know, the mystical side of religions was really the only entry point for me. And Eckhart Tolle's understandings. And I went up to the local ashram here and started to learn to meditate and got involved with them. And found a lot of relief just by continuing on my journey in this way. And it was after a few years that I started to go back to work and knew that I could not work as a normal general practitioner, that my role was now as a spiritual counselor, and there was a form of energy that I could use. But what completely catapulted me was a further massive abrupt awakening, where I went back with the local ashram that were a Hindu.
We're going to come to that. We're going to come to that because that's fascinating. But there's a couple of things that I want to talk about in your story, which I asked and had some information about.
Sure.
So a lot of people that watch these videos, are going through that grief. I have a lot of clients who contact me, and because I'm a medium, they say, can you contact my dead relatives? But really that's not my role as a teacher. As a teacher of deliberate creation, I'm here to, yes, I can show you how to do it, but I'm here to show you how to flow your energy so that you can be the creator of your reality. That's my role. And but this grief thing, it's interesting that you said that when you're in this place of grief, that you had these knowings that came to you. And I said to them, I'm talking to my mob as I'm listening to your conversation, how can she be in such a place of low vibration like grief and still hear you, which is a high vibration? And what they said to me as I was listening to you, they said, because there's a place that we get to in grief where there's a complete surrender. Because you feel so bad that you can't maintain that vibration, and there's sort of like at some point you just like give up. There's a release.
It's the cracking open.
It's a cracking, and in
it's the absolute surrender. I cannot possibly bear this.
And you give up the vibration, like you give up the thought.
You give up.
You release.
You actually give up, but in a sort of in a higher sense. It's like literally, take me, whatever is required.
I surrender the logical brain that's trying to figure this out, because I can't figure this out. And in that crack, there's the light comes in, like the consciousness.
Totally.
And guidance.
And what is interesting too is people would say, oh, the stages of grief, and they'd say, oh, there's acceptance, and I'd say, it's surrender. I don't think our humanness really ever accepts it. It's just too awful for the human. But the surrender and then the acceptance is of this higher dimensional self that says, this was always part of the plan.
It was part of the plan.
And what is interesting, and one of the important things I need to mention, is my 4-year-old son said to me on many occasions, I love you more than you, Mummy. I love you. Now, I was non-religious, non-spiritual. I didn't even understand. I thought, what is this sort of crazy jargon for a 4-year-old? But he was referring to the big you, the real me, the multi-dimensional me. And I love you more than you. It's, my role here is to help you find that you. And that is the part that is, infinite, ongoing, and more important to me with our contract that we have here. And I love you more than you. Human.
It's beautiful. I've heard you say that in another interview, and again, because as I watch these interviews, I'm asking questions like people that are watching my interviews, and then I receive the guidance as I'm like, what does she mean by that, and what does that mean, and tell me about that. So I'm always talking to them as I'm listening to you and to videos. And he was just demonstrating unconditional love. Like, he was saying, I love you more than you. Yes, he was saying, I love the bigger part of you, like the conscious part of you, and not the logical sort of ego mind that's contained within the fabric of our society that says this is how life is. But he's also saying he loves that part too. I love you so much that I'm going to leave this body and I'm going to wake you up.
Look, totally. I love all of you.
Yeah.
And, in this death is my gift.
In this death is my gift.
But, again, 3D thinking does not assist that, which was interesting because I found other people's grief and understanding of the grief around me they're grieving and they're lost for William, and the community was devastated. And I found it so uncomfortable to be around people for any length of time, because the way they held grief was so different to how I was holding it. And again, it goes down to that vibration, because 3D is very much about the victim and, you know, poor you. And I was using every tool that I could come across to transmute this from the victim mentality to actually something incredible is going on here.
Yeah,
and something incredible is going to happen to me. And this is the beginning. And that kept coming through. And I was just going, there is something amazing that's going to unfold. And then little miracles started to happen. And one of them was the birth of my child. So I knew that I needed to have another child, something to love in this 3D that wouldn't have been here unless there had been this tragic loss. And miracle pregnancy. Seriously, we're talking miracle pregnancy. And her due date was his death date to the year. And then I called her Eleanor. And that was just the name that came to me. And that name means the light. And there was just this constant, you know, reminders of little miracles that built into bigger miracles and bigger understandings and bigger awarenesses and more guidance and more feeling that he was around and more feeling that he was directing me. And interestingly, the odd person in the community that was a bit psychic would always come with a message. You know, your son came to me to say, you know, what you're doing is right, or, you know, or something that didn't even make sense to them. They'd give me that message and I'd go, oh, okay, I know something's going on here. So I was supported, and, you know, thank God. And
as we all are all the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, we really don't notice that we're supported until we hit that place of, I don't know, where we reach out for it. You know, like we reach out with our mind, like
Sure.
you know, what's going on, grief or trauma. Or I remember
Sure.
I had a shop years ago and there was a fire in the middle of the night and I was feeling this desperation. And all these people, physical people, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to come and help me clean up my shop. And I just thought, you know, like I saw that physical support.
Sure.
Because, you know, I had been doing, I'm so unsupported, you know, that had been a thought that I'd heard.
Sure.
But, yeah, we're so supported. Yeah, something else that you said in another interview I saw was when the car came headed for William, you said it was kind of like there was this direct, it was just headed in his direction.
It was completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, it's the equivalent of the, you know, the fridge falling out of the sky and just having to drop on you. You know, it really was just this. We were on the beach, there's a big cliff, and I was standing on the beach, and I remember looking up, you know, 15 minutes before we walked up, and I saw the car driving down from the top of the hill on the road above. Now, I've been back there, you can't see anything. I had seen it somehow remote viewing, or, you know, psychically, I'd seen this car, this dark blue car.
Yeah.
And when I was walking up the stairs, he was ahead of me by sort of one stair, you know, set. And again, I couldn't see. And he was between my brother and brother-in-law. And he was standing on that path. And then I hear this incredible bang. And my immediate response was, which one of mine? Now, there were multiple children, and my sister was beside me. She thought it was a garbage bin being knocked over, you know, and I'm going, which one? And within one moment, I'm there to see this car completely, you know, pinned against the fence. But it was insane, because it was a direct line to him with uncle on either side. They're completely unscathed, and he's, you know, literally squashed
by divine design.
You know, and incredible. And I think what's also interesting, Karen, we talked about the support, but you know, what was interesting for me was how uncomfortable the support from the medical profession and the psychology was You know, it wasn't uncomfortable because it wasn't opening me up enough to this expanded understanding. And I
wants
think
to keep you in your grief.
Well, it's confusing as well because, you know, you're told, oh, well, you'll need some grief counselling. And after a couple of sessions, it was just like, that is not serving me. Now, that's not to say it doesn't serve other people, and that's not to say there's other practitioners that can hold a higher perspective, but where I was guided to at the time was extremely uncomfortable. And again, my grief process was different to the average person. I needed quiet, I needed stillness, I needed retreating, and that really went on for years.
Really?
And really continues today, where I really live that sort of life. I don't like the noise of lots of people and the distraction if it's not at a high vibration, because I find it just unsupportive of who I really am. So
interesting that you were saying that you felt unsupported because it was your own profession, because as a doctor you were in that profession, and so here you were within your own profession looking for guidance. But anyway, it woke you up. It woke you up as my mother's death woke me up. And I've interviewed a man whose wife was murdered here in Sydney years ago.
Wow.
He was an orthodontist and a pillar in his community, and, you know, and the girls were at private school, and his wife was murdered in the middle of the day. And here's this scientist, and he's got everything like you have. He's got the money, he's got the career, he's got the beautiful wife, he's got the 3 daughters in the private school. He's just having a lovely third dimensional experience until his wife is murdered. And he's just in his dressing room. The next day he's on the floor, you know, like where the blood stain is on the carpet, just surrendering, just on his knees, praying to a God he doesn't believe in, saying, I surrender. And in that moment, he has this moment of grace and knowing that everything is by divine design. And he didn't understand it because his scientific mind and his agnostic atheist mind just goes, I don't get that. And so he spent the rest of his years, you know, seeking out what that was. So it's just fascinating how death can be such a wake-up call. And I had a client the other day whose brother died a few weeks ago, and she wanted to speak to him in spirit, and it was a bigger conversation than just knowing he's in spirit.
And I think that that's also interesting. 2 points that I wanted to bring up. One was the fact that also the medical profession were very keen for antidepressants and sleeping tablets. You know, would you like some? Well, I didn't want any of it, and I haven't taken one ever, a sleeping tablet or an antidepressant to help me deal with the grief or the process I've been through. That I knew instinctively, no way was that where I was meant to be going. And again, I think that can possibly stop you going through the necessary process to crack that deeply, because you're sort of numbing it at a level and not really getting to own exactly, you know, the crack and the, you know, the deep, the dark night that we need to go through, as unbearable as it is. But the other thing you were mentioning, it's gone. It was
well, you know, being open to the light doesn't necessarily have to take a dark night. It does for a lot of the people I interview. I've had people hit by trucks and, you know, murders, and another woman I interviewed, Scarlett Lewis, her son was shot down in the Sandy Hook gunning. Her 5-year-old, beautiful 5-year-old, and it can take that, but it doesn't have to. You know, the light can get in a very I agree with that, but I think that I was so comfortably 3D. I was so incredibly, we're talking picture perfect light here. Yeah. That there was really, it's almost to the degree of the, you know, the 3D, you know, stability, that there was no way I was going anywhere out of that. I wouldn't have gone, you know, it was too good to be seeking ever, even if it had been sort of. And I've heard people say, you know, all new age people are crazy, they're just unhappy with their life, so they're looking for, and it's kind of like, it's like that unhappiness makes you look for something else, because the money and the job and the lover and all that sort of stuff that we think that's going to bring us our happiness is something. It's like, well, I've got it all, and there's got to be something else, the rock star or the music star. You know, they I was having a conversation online this morning about, you know, how this amazing rock star we have in Australia, you know him, I won't mention his name, he's very spiritual now because he's had the fame and the fortune, he's done it all. And now it's like there's something else. Now I want to bring a message of hope and love. But let's get on with your story, because I interrupted you. So
Sure.
you cracked open and you were seeking, you had your solitude, and then you went to India to find something more. Like, what were you looking for?
Well, I was just guided to go to India in 2014 with the group that was travelling from the ashram here. What was interesting is they had asked me to come. They were going back to that village every couple of years, and I had said over and over, I can't go. It will be dangerous for my family, which was a very interesting thing to come out of my mouth. And I didn't quite understand. Well, in fact, how I interpreted that on a personal level was that my love for what I was seeking was going to be so great that the consequences of the family unit may be disruptive, although I didn't understand to what extent. And it certainly was interesting because it was my 14-year-old daughter who said, Mum, we have to go on that retreat back to India, which is a great thing because it was really on her suggestion. And my teenage son, or 12-year-old son at the time, decided to come as well. So the three of us ventured off. And I'm very grateful that it was her that said, Mum, we really must go. And it was incredibly supported by my husband at the time. And he chose, we thought we'd all go, but he chose to stay back with the two younger girls and allow me to go. And he had been incredibly supportive of my spiritual journey to that point. So I arrive in India, and I arrive in the village. Well, the energy of India and the energy of the village was just incredible for me. I was just electrified. It felt magnificent. I was in that other frequency.
Fifth dimension.
It was superb. And I spent many days in the temple and long meditations, and it was in the temple where I received a zap on the head. And it was towards the end of those 2 weeks that I had been there, and it was completely transforming. I came home and nothing felt the same. I really was at that point catapulted into what I call cosmic consciousness. And I really was finding it very difficult to integrate and stabilize at that time, particularly because of the density of my family of origin and the community having no understanding of this. And it was constantly, what's wrong with you? What's happened to you? You're behaving so weirdly. There's something not right here. You're hiding behind spirituality for bad behavior. What's happening? I've lost you. I can't find you. And I'm meanwhile, up in some other realm trying to sort of integrate what was going on. And I felt amazing apart from when I was attacked. And had I been able to be nurtured in that and sort of taken aside and wrapped in a blanket and given soup and said, wow, something big is happening for you, that would have been, preferable. But what happened is I with their sort of judgment and attack, I started to retreat and really just was unable. I wasn't solid enough in my experience to explain what was happening. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't have a mentor and I didn't have a community or somebody who could come in and say, oh yes, this isn't, this is something that happens to people. It was really considered, just bizarre psychiatric. And, I was assessed by a psychologist at the time who fortunately did have some spiritual understanding, but even he had limitations to the level of what I had received. Anyway, I knew all along underneath I was fine. I did know I was supported and I was protected. But again, the humanness was struggling. And I was thrown out of the home, the family home. I was told I wasn't adequately looking after the children, although I was I was able to do those motherly duties. I was probably a bit withdrawn, but I certainly was able to continue. But it was the constant sort of hounding and judgment that sort of was difficult. And my ex-husband at the time didn't think I would able to manage. He took control of all the money. He took away my passport. I was living in a hotel, and really, but having moments of absolute peace and clarity where I would go and sit at the beach and just say, something is happening here. it needs to integrate. And again, I asked God, please, this is so difficult. I'm willing to do what's required. What do I need to do? And I was guided, given a name of an energetic healer who I then started to see on a regular basis, and she helped me ground this experience. So I spent a lot of time with her. She'd done the Barbara Brennan method. Yeah. And so she was very much about embodying and grounding, and that's what I needed. And the experience had been so wild that I just knew I also needed the support of frequencies that could actually soothe me while I was going through that. So I chose to go back to India for 6 weeks after that experience. And again, that was looked upon as very wrong by everybody else, because they were saying, what are you doing going back there? You need to be here. You need to, pull yourself together. But
you need to return to the person you were, the doctor, the logical person, the person that fits into the mainstream society. But what I want to talk about is for people watching this that are going through their own journey, just to explain a bit like what you experienced when you got the tap on the head, like what was happening, mentally, physically, emotionally to you.
Look, I think the immediate probably more of the experience was leading up to that, where there was just this feeling of expansion and joy and peace and love and just absolute thirst for everything I was surrounded by, and the love of being in India, and just this feeling like I was from there and I was connected to everything and everybody there, and there was something I felt Indian, it was just like at my core here, there was an Indianness about me, and this love of this great being that was buried there. It was really quite incredible. And the zap on the head was just this sort of woof, like just a sort of a wave of energy shock come through my head that was really, it was a force. And I just remember going, whoa, what was that? But it was only as I returned home to realize, I have completely, I've been activated. I'm transforming. I don't feel the same way I did. And, I needed time and an ability to integrate it. Yeah. And again, with no really clear understanding of what was really going on. Yeah. And it was extremely difficult for the human me. But again, I had so much support.
This is what I'm seeing, hearing. You were in a place of expansion and gratitude and joy, so you were opening because you were raising your vibration. And then as you experienced more of an opening, some people call it a Kundalini experience, there are many names, DNA activation, whatever you want to call it, spiritual awakening. Life says, can you maintain this? We're going to throw some stuff at you. Your husband's going to reject you. Your children are going to reject you. They're going to throw you out of that. Can you maintain a gratitude that is not based on outside circumstances? Now, therein is the lesson to awakening, because it's not what's happening outside of us that gives us that joy. It's that connection to that joy and that peace and that expansion that you were experiencing in the ashram and in those cracked moments, those moments of surrender.
And what was interesting was this inner knowing that something was supporting me and something was happening, for me and for a greater good. And I had to continue to trust that, continuously have faith that whatever was happening to me was for my highest good and the highest good ultimately, for humanity. Although, that would still be argued by many people in my, in my immediate family and in the community, because again, they still don't understand, because they cannot feel or receive what it is that's happened to me. Although, and interestingly, my children, came back to me, and, I have them 50% of the time, and I have a wonderful relationship with all 4 of them. And, the younger girls are certainly understanding and starting to open and having their own experiences. And my older 2 have softened to it and understand that there is something more going on here. So, it is, and my parents have come back to a very supportive role, that we don't understand you, but we wish you well and we're happy to support you. And so I have manage to ground it, integrate it, and there lies the greatest strength, because it's all fantastic to have this cosmic experience, and boy, it's a beautiful time if you're not hounded. But where the where the real juice lies is by having that embodied and then being able to use those frequencies to heal people. So
to help people, but like we're all one. So as we heal ourselves, we heal others, and as we heal others, we heal ourselves. I mean, the journey of being a practitioner or a healer or a doctor in any way, shape or form, and, I've practiced this for years, and all my clients that come to me, they have issues that are a direct reflection of who I am or who I've been. And there's no separation, there's me in your body and me in this cat's body and me and everybody. Just there's only one of us in the room, you know what I mean? And so, as a healer, the work that we do is with ourselves, because as we raise our vibration and we live a fulfilled, exciting, joyful, loving life, those people that judge us for not being a part of the mainstream story anymore, they look on, because we've got all that they're striving for. We've got it. They're looking for the joy inside, the money and the job and the relationship. And as we're cruising through life in our crazy new age way, and we're experiencing that which they want. So they have to come home to that.
Absolutely. I think, though, that they struggle initially to how can they feel like, how can they have peace and joy and love when, so much has fallen away. And that people struggle with that. It really challenges their understanding, and that in itself is a teaching. Itself is a teaching. So the more I embody, the more I stand, in my, multidimensional connection, the more people are starting to understand, wow, one, she's not mad. Two, she's getting on and doing some really good work. And really helping people.
And she's happy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm, it's not that I don't, still miss that. It would have been lovely if my husband could have joined me on this journey, but, I've got my children back, and I'm doing some amazing things, meeting amazing people, and doing what I love, where work is joy. And being this is joy. And, there's not that dryness of living. It is actually an expanded, exciting, activated beingness that I didn't have before. And that's what's great.
So as a doctor, now that you're experiencing this awakening and all that goes along with that, like what else is there to experience and know and remember? Obviously, you've gone back to being a healer, doctor, practitioner, as an MD, as a medical doctor, how did it transform your work?
Well, incredibly so. So even before I'd gone to India, I knew I didn't want to practice mainstream general practice, and I needed to become some sort of counsellor, with a spiritual perspective, and really help people navigate difficult situations. And then it became more and more obvious to me that the disease process was about how far out of alignment we were with the truth of who we are.
Thank you.
And that just became so glaringly obvious. And I just knew the more I could bring people back into alignment with their truth, that self-healing was possible. From, physical, mental, emotional diseases.
That's it.
And, it then just became a journey that continued to sort of get downloaded to me, understandings of how healing could take place. And then after the Indian experience, it was just extreme. I just knew that there was so much more that could be done. And what happens for me now is this ability to bring the energy frequencies in and around me and activate that in somebody else. And also and then start this spontaneous awakening So, you know, their DNA starts to activate. But one of the things I'm particularly about is cleaning off that gets in the way of this ability to do that, because as humans, we have been manipulated and, you know, enslaved into our way of being that has taken us from our natural state.
There's a lot of people on the internet talking about how we've been manipulated and enslaved, and I actually don't use that language because that's victim-based language. And with everything that I speak about empowerment, because as much as we, you know, call it enslavement or whatever interfered with, we actually as souls chose that. We chose to come into this experience where we forget who we are. And then, you know, and that call that enslavement, and we choose to buy into a mainstream super highway of consciousness and to be part of the crowd, believing all that we see around us as part of reality, and then to wake up. Because had we not forgotten, the journey of awakening would not be as much fun. You know, to know the end of the movie before you see the movie, it sort of spoils it. And so that awakening journey, although it can be tragic for people, like death, and there's death in mine was a death experience, yours was a death experience, or it can be hit by a truck or blown up in a bomb blast or a murder. I mean, there's so many ways, or it can just be in meditation and having a Kundalini experience. But that awakening journey from the limited perspective to the broader perspective is such a beautiful journey.
And look, I agree with all of that, and I certainly don't use that terminology as a victim mentality, but as an awareness for the work that I do to actually help people overcome significant blocks to who they are supposed to be. And so, from my perspective, I know. Well, you know, we've got to understand we have different perspectives, and I fully understand where you're coming from. But for me, there are things that people need to address to actually clean off that's continuing to keep them suppressed, you know, in a particular paradigm that is not helping them find the truth of who they are.
Cleaned off. Because you see, once you awaken to this energy, it's like a thought form. Like everything is energy. You can't. You know, I was at a friend's place recently down the coast, and there's a judge that lives next door that always comes over for dinner when I'm down there, and he just doesn't believe in anything I do, and he doesn't believe in life after death. And you know, he's a very scientific. He's been a judge his whole life. He's been in the judicial system, and he just thinks anyone that believes in life after death is just crazy. And when you understand that energy you can't kill energy, you can only transform it. It's a bit like cleaning off. You can just transform energy. And so when you buy into a vibration, a more positive, a more enlightened, a more expanded vibration, the denser vibration can't exist in that same space.
Absolutely.
And so you don't actually let go of anything. You just move up and it's gone. It's sort of like the path to the old house still exists, but it's a well-worn path. But as you take a new path, you kind of forget how to get to the old house. I did that when I moved back to the city. I grew up around here and I spent 10 years up on the northern beaches. I came back and I couldn't remember where the path was because it was an old path. You know what I mean? It was just an analogy.
Well, and I agree with you, and I think that's brilliant, and I think that's totally right, that there is nothing that this higher frequency and expansion of who we are can, you know, that there's nothing that we can't overcome without a doubt. But I guess my job is to help people navigate where they can't get to that expansion because they feel, you know, whether it's a trigger that's come in through a family lineage program or a trigger that's come in through their past life incarnations through a vow or a contract, that they can't do what we are saying, because people need some assistance and guidance with you know, transmuting some of that so that old path literally melts away and doesn't get used again. So they need a reminder of who they really are. So ultimately we are, and it is about self-responsibility without a doubt, and it is about stepping up into those frequencies and being open to them and being brave enough to step off into this unknown existence which offers this peace, love and joy, when you have to let go of the constructs of your previous existence on some levels, because it does alter your relationship to the 3D world. And it actually alters it for the better. But the cracking out of it is painful because it is not well received by those around you who like you to fit into the piece of the puzzle of the family unit exactly how you were. And so as you're rising out of it and changing your frequency, those other pieces of puzzle are not fitting in so well together, and it starts to break up some of their belief systems, which is a good thing for the awakening of humanity at large. But it is uncomfortable, and I guess that this is the thing. It is an uncomfortable process.
You're so right, Maree. It is uncomfortable, and you know what's happening globally, because, you know, we have a person in a powerful position that a lot of people are shaking their fists at, and you know what? He's making a lot of people very uncomfortable.
Well, again, it's through this uncomfortable process that we start to look deeper, because we realise there perhaps isn't the authority that we thought was going to save us. This isn't about running to lawyers or running to doctors or running
politicians.
To help us. We need to find who we are and our truth and activate that. And then we will get great change and great peace on this planet.
You know what I find really interesting, as I've been listening to people talk about, you know, what's happened in the US politically, and because when it happened, I was in Perth, actually, at my brother's place, and my little 15-year-old nephew said, yeah, Trump got in, and I just thought, nah, that's just not possible. He didn't. I was so like, really? There's something going on here that I need to investigate, which is kind of like death. You know, there's some bigger picture here. There's a bigger picture than what it looks like.
I think that this is the case. And again, when we always go for that bigger picture, what is it that we are being shown? And what is it that's unfolding here that is in our highest good? So again, you know, it's about, you know, finding the higher perspective in everything that's going on to actually transmute it into that is actually serving our situation.
And interestingly, everyone I've heard that has talked about why they voted for him has said they wanted to shake things up. And so the energy, the desire for change was stronger, was more prominent than a desire to have political correctness or all that stuff that he doesn't stand for, because he stands for so many things that we don't, you know, that most people don't stand for. I mean, there are people that have loved that sort of rhetoric, you know. He's great. I love that he hates all these people and he wants to build walls, and I love that. But there are people that just want so change really is the energy of the now. So your experience has been a shift really quickly, because it only happened a few years ago. There are so many beings in this room right now, and they keep can you hear them? I keep hearing them. I keep seeing them. There are just so many people.
I can feel
people in this room.
I can feel it. You know, we're very well supported in this conversation and being guided, and you know, change. And I think change is where we are at, because we need to change, because really for the survival of the planet and humanity, we need some change. But what is interesting is the human design doesn't like change. It likes stability. So the humanness likes, that's where they feel safe. That's the safety mechanism, is in the stability. And getting people to understand that change is actually a positive and not a negative in whatever shape it, you know, it turns up, which then gets me to this line that I'll often use, which is dancing with what presents. Dance with what presents. Find, you know, a higher perspective with it, and actually bring your, you know, elevate your frequencies and actually, you know, meet the event from a different dimension. That we need to get out of that 3D limited understanding, go higher with perspective, elevate our frequencies, and actually alter the dimensions that we're in. And you know, that's really important, and very important at this time on the planet of great change. So you know,
always look beyond what presents. One of my favorite, I've talked about her last interview, but Byron Katie, she's one of my favorite teachers, and you know, she says one of her sayings is, never argue with what is, because when you argue, you lose, but only 100% of the time, because what is. So when you argue with what is, you're in suffering. And whether that's a good or a bad thing, or when you argue with what is, like when there's a death of someone, or when there's your politician doesn't get in, or you get sacked from your job, or your husband leaves you or has an affair or whatever, or your girlfriend plays up on you, what is, and when you argue with it, you lose and you're in suffering. But she also says, who needs God's opinion when we've got yours? she says, God's opinion is what is, we can change the status quo, but, arguing with what is like, well, this is my opinion. It's like, we don't need God's opinion.
So well, and waste of energy, and, dis-ease and out of alignment presents itself right there. So the minute we have that surrender and self-acceptance of a situation and learn to get that higher perspective, the better we are from a physical and mental and emotional perspective in terms of well-being and health.
Yeah.
So, it's important to actually understand that that surrender, and then, finding that higher perspective. So, beautiful. Yeah,
having a hard perspective. That's what we're all challenged with, is in whatever's happening in our life, be it disease or pain or disappointment, is finding, there's something else going on here. So
that's where I do my work, to actually help people transmute their old belief patterns and their old understandings, or the well-worn path of a family lineage program of, I have to be a certain way, I have to think a certain way, because it's been inherited, the way we think and behave, to fit into this lower dimension, and to actually help people navigate.
It has been inherited. Years ago I was teaching a healing technique where we talked about all this. It was funny, I was in my early 30s and someone rang me up and said, do you want to do a DNA course? And I said, oh, what? He said, we're transmuting the DNA, we're going to change DNA. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And he was riveting on. And I remember just tuning in and going, I'm coming. I said, stop talking. You don't have to explain it to me. I'm coming. Yeah. So I went and did this course, and I used to teach it. And we talked about the inherited, thought form, the heritage. But I think that what happens with a lot of people, because I've got a neighbour who talks like this all the time, my family comes from here and we've always done it this way, and this is the way it is, and you have to do it my way because I'm right, because this has been, for generations, and this has been, she just talks like this, which a lot of people do, especially who are connected to a culture that they're very proud of. But there's something about it that if I change my ways, I'm not going to be connected to the people I love, which is exactly what you went through. And that's a big fear that people go through.
Totally. But I guess that what people need to understand is, by generally speaking, keeping yourself in those limited programs of a family lineage that no longer serve our time, is actually, again, a form of lack of self-worth, and a people pleasing to the detriment of the truth of who you are. That, we dance to somebody else's tune, fit in and do the right thing. But is it actually in everybody's highest good? Is it actually helping people consciously evolve to keep some of that in place? And that's what people have to face. And for me, it wasn't even a choice. It was the genie was out of the bottle, boom, and I had to just go with it. And I do understand the difficulty people face where they've been in a particular mindset and belief system and way of behaving, and just wondering why they don't feel good. There's a dullness, there's a depression. I mean, if you look, Karen, at the rate of depression and how many antidepressants are out there at the moment, we really are in an interesting time where the old programs and belief systems are, not serving, and people are feeling, depressed. And we look at the rates of obesity and youth suicide. There really is, despite the fact that particularly in our Western world, we've got, a pretty comfortable existence for most of us, that this level of, unrest is really is quite incredible. So there is something that needs to be evolving here. Is this embodiment of the truth of who we are, which does become at the at the loss of some of those programs that no longer serve us. But it's a big leap for people, and it is difficult. However, they are finding more and more that the traditional way is not necessarily supporting them. That shutting yourself down with an antidepressant hasn't actually helped your conscious involvement.
Yeah. Look, it's only going to get more difficult because we were having a discussion with Garnet Schulhauser, one of my favourite teachers that I've talked with on ATP, and we were talking about ascension. He was his experiences are amazing. His spirit guide takes him out in his astral body and flies him around the universe and shows him all this stuff, and then he writes it all down in books. Because what happens is we all fly around the universe at night doing extraordinary things, talking to our dead relatives and our spirit guides and our angels, and just hanging out in source energy, when we're asleep. And then we come back into this physical dimension and we can't remember. I struggle every morning to remember. What did I do last night? Anyway, he has full memory when he comes back in and he writes it all down.
Wow,
and
beautiful.
He was saying that he had a conversation with Mother Gaia, with Earth. He was taken in his astral form into Antarctica, I think, and into the Earth.
Wow.
And he spoke to like a mist that was Gaia, the consciousness of Gaia.
Wow.
And she said it's her time to evolve and move into the fifth dimension, to a higher frequency. And she has been trying to do that for a while. And humans are holding her back. And so because they're not giving up their limiting negative thought forms, they're still buying into fear and violence and separate thinking. And ego. It's all about me, and I'm going to make it happen for me, even if I have to walk all over you. So unless we shift en masse, we're just not going with her. And so that can mean a few things. She'll kick us off with her, storm systems or whatever, or we'll blow ourselves up. But so there's this time of, the future is not certain.
Well, we are in a very interesting time, although I have great faith. That we are actually doing precisely what we need to be doing by having these conversations, and more and more people are able to hear it. And I think we do have the support of the off-world beings. To will us onto this, the higher path. And
they're on the sidelines going, whoop, whoop,
totally. And I think that they're coming in stronger and stronger now.
They are.
And, we're getting more support from these other dimensions. We're also, I believe, getting extra photonic light packages coming in and activating some of this dormant DNA. And that will transition us so that we start getting back to that state of peace, love and joy as a natural state, with, of course, the odd stress coming up and issue that we're all dealing with, instead of the other way around, which is the perpetual sort of, stress, life's tough, and I'm looking forward to the one party in a fortnight. We've got to reverse this. And, and I think it is happening for us, with the support and things that are in place. And, we are moving into a different era, I believe. And I really believe we are going to do it. And I think the fact that we're having conversations like this, and I've had my other interviews, and, it's happening, and I'm getting lots of people Skyping me for my assistance that have these great understandings, and it's global. It's happening everywhere. People are waking up.
I think Mary said at the conference, didn't she? She said half the population of the planet are galactic beings that have incarnated to help us.
Yes.
So if there's like 7 billion of us, there's like 3.5 billion.
Fantastic.
That's what she said. That was quite a random thing that she said.
Well, and maybe some of them are still about to pop into their awakening. And again, that's where I see, my job and your job and the other, the others that are doing this work. That's our job, to help awaken people to the truth, because as they start to feel some of this change coming in, it is uncomfortable and they need guidance and, just something to quell that sort of mental state of, oh my God, what's happening? So somebody to help bring in the higher perspective and actually change the way things are perceived. So beneficial, as well as the energy work that we're doing, able to, help people feel who they are by being in the presence of those energies.
Yeah. It was given to me, an analogy was given to me when I was sort of torturing over all this stuff as I was on my intense part of the journey, grappling with those thought forms that were not serving me. Yeah. That the brighter the light gets, think about turning on a light on a room, the clearer, and it was just told as an analogy, dirt is not the great, but the clearer the dirt, you can see that, like in a dark room, everything looks perfect, but when you turn the light up, you see all the all the things that don't look so good, or the dirt in the room, which is what happens. So the lighter we get, the more our limiting ideas about ourselves, the more come to light. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that that's a really important thing to discuss, is the fact that, sometimes with this awakening, you'll have that honeymoon period where it is all love and light and feels so joyous. And then the hard work starts, which is the self-reflection and the self-responsibility and what's actually going on here. And that's not to make people believe that something's gone wrong. It really is to say, no, keep going. You step by step, this is what's happening. It's almost like you get that honeymoon period to show you what's possible and what's there once you've done more of the work. But, I often see this with people where it is this beautiful awakening, and then, oh boy, now I'm really got to face some of this. And the acceptance that things will change around them, that sometimes friendship groups need to change, or sometimes locations, or jobs to support the frequencies that they are becoming. And it is a good thing. And that everybody has the opportunity to consciously evolve, and by doing it, you're helping others do it as well.
Exactly. Oh, Maree, it's been so beautiful to talk with you today. Thank you so much, and congratulations on the work you're doing. And I love talking to doctors. I've been a doctor many times in past lives, as I've said to you, and I look on this crazy system that we have, this allopathic system, and sort of shake my head and go, one day we're all going to look back on this and say, how could we torture people like the way we did, and call it healing? And so it's beautiful when doctors wake up. I find that very exciting for some reason.
Yeah, well, it's it is exciting. It has its challenges, but as I said, I'm doing my job. I'm standing in my strength and saying, this is who I am, and this is what's happening. And I'm getting the results with people, and that's where that's where it counts. I am actually getting amazing results with my people, more than I ever could have in my previous way of practicing. And I think that's what's important. That that's what it's about. How can I best serve? And for me, the way I can best serve is by doing what I'm doing and what I've been guided to do.
And you're still maintaining your relationship with William.
Absolutely.
Who's your little 4-year-old that left his body in order to facilitate this beautiful awakening process. So I just wanted to say one more thing to you. What did you call your daughter? Eleanor. And it means the light. Yeah, Ellen. I gave my daughter that second name, Ellen. It came to me before she was born too, and I looked it up, and the light. I gave her Ellen as a second name.
Yeah, beautiful.
Which comes from Eleanor.
Yeah.
The light. Thank you for all that you do.
My pleasure, and thank you. And beautiful to talk to you, and great to share this conversation.
Thanks for being on the show. And remember, if you want to meet some of the people that I interview, I've interviewed so many fascinating people over the years on ATP Media. Started off on community radio, and now here we are on YouTube. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Podcast Mixcloud. We're all over the place, so you can tune in visually and audio. But if you join the Inner Sanctum, you have an opportunity. It's a subscription. It's $22 Australian to come online on our monthly webinars and meet some of the beautiful people that I spoke with. Last Saturday, we spoke with Garnet. That's when we were talking about the ascension process. Next month, we have Krista Gorman, who had an NDE. She's going to talk about what it's like hanging out in heaven and what goes on there.
Wow.
And we'll invite Maree on, but we're booked up for the next 8 months with teachers, but we'll invite you on at the end of the year, and you can
Oh, beautiful. Fantastic.
get to ask people questions. And it's these webinar series, I put snippets of them up on YouTube for the public to see, but it's by subscription. So the people that are members, they come on and they get this personal access.
Oh, fantastic. Beautiful.
So thanks again for joining me on ATP Media. Remember to subscribe and like and all that fabulous stuff, and leave your comments underneath on the YouTube or on iTunes. Thanks.
Beautiful.
Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for another enlightened conversation on Accentuate the Positive. If you would like spiritual guidance from my guides, Blissful Beings, go to KarenSwain.com for a reading, or to listen to more enlightened thought leaders share their wisdom. Go to the listen page on KarenSwain.com and choose who you want to listen to. All the podcasts are also available on iTunes. Remember to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, you name it, we're there. Until next time, bye for now.
If you feel like that's what you want to do,